Welcome to our LB's The Lover of Books author chat. Now to introduce this wonderful novelist and a favorite of all of ours, that's why we're here tonight. Diane Chamberlain is the New York Times, USA, and Sunday Times bestselling author of 27 published novels in more than 20 languages. Influenced by her former career as a social worker and a psychotherapist, she writes suspenseful stories that touch both heart and mind. She lives and writes right here in North Carolina, the state that has become her true home and has also spawned many settings for her stories, just like this one. The Last House on the Street has a New York Times bestselling Sally Hepworth saying, quote, Diane Chamberlain is at her absolute best in this dual timeline. Sensitively and unflinchingly told, this novel will make you cry, seethe, swoon, and rage. I've loved every book Diane Chamberlain has written, but The Last House on the Street is without doubt her masterpiece. Let's welcome Diane here tonight. So glad you could make it.
Thank you all for coming. I'm delighted to be here, Laura Beth.
Well, let's talk about this novel that has Claire McIntosh and all of us here saying how powerful it is. And I'm going to start at the end and work my way back, although no spoilers right now. So you have an author's note at the end of the book. And in that note, you talk about your interest in racial injustice while you were searching in your high school library. Thank you all you librarians out there. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. And eventually you came across Scope. So you've held on to this interest for quite a long time, several decades. Why now? What sparked it? What prompted you into this voters' rights issue?
You know, I think you're right. When I was a teenager, I was very interested in civil rights issues. I grew up in a town that was, my schools were half Black and half white at that time. And so with the civil rights movement that was all around me, I was just really tuned into it because I could see in my classmates' lives how they were impacted on a day-to-day basis. And this was in New Jersey, so this wasn't even in the South. So it was very much on my mind as a teenager. And I learned how to write research papers in high school. I had this great teacher who completely changed really my life because I still use the techniques that she taught us in learning how to do the research and the organization and the notes and the outlines and everything for a project. So I became really glued to the library at that time, since there was no internet, looking for books, looking in the, what do you call it, periodical review for current day articles about subjects. And at some point I came across this thing called Scope, Summer Community Organization and Political Education Group, which was teenagers, not much older than I was at the time, who would go into the South, white teenagers who would go into the South and attempt to register Black voters at the time that the Voting Rights Act was being signed. So I always had this experience of writing about Scope and learning about Scope. I always had that in the back of my mind. And I thought that someday I would write about it. And because voting rights issues had become such an important newsworthy issue, it just seemed like the right time for me to start writing about it and doing my research about it and learning more about it. So, so it became even more timely by the time the book came out. It's really a major issue, I think.
Absolutely. And I was fascinated that when you were looking up Scope to find research items, you found them on eBay. What was it that you found that really helped kind of shape this novel? Or I'm just so curious.
This tiny little book.
Wow.
This was put together by a man named Willie Siegel, who was a scope worker, and he was left in charge of all of the documents related to scope. The only thing is they were not in any kind of order. And so he did not put them in any kind of order. So this book is fascinating to me because you really have to dig through it to see what's there. There's newspaper articles about scope. There's lots of pictures. There's forms that the students filled out at the end of the program to say what worked for them, how they were changed by it. There's half of a letter from Martin Luther King. I don't know where the other half is. It's that kind of material that it got me very excited because I like doing that kind of research and just digging through it and feeling like I was in that time by checking out this book. So that was, yeah, I found it on eBay just by, typing in summer community organization and political education. You just never know what you're going to find there. And then there was also another book that was a huge help to me. And that was a book called This Bright Light of Ours, written by Maria Gittin, who was a scope worker. She was 19 years old. She wrote the book of her experience. And she also, in between writing about her experiences, she kind of steps back and talks about how scope came to be and all the political things that were going on at the time. And the thing that I like the best about that book is that she didn't sugarcoat anything about her involvement. She, admits she was 19. She had all the hormones and not great decision-making that a 19-year-old can have. She was incredibly motivated, but she made some mistakes, and that sort of invited me to allow my characters, my young characters, to make mistakes, which of course makes for much more interesting reading, I hope.
Now, did you actually interview her and have feedback, not just reading her novel? What did she bring to the table that maybe the book didn't?
Her book is a memoir. It's not a novel. So it's part memoir and then part explanations about what scope was all about. And when I interviewed her, she was very concerned, I think, about being interviewed and wanting scope to be represented in a good light. So yeah, it was very interesting to talk to her, and she was real honest about what it was like to be 19 years old. And she was most of the students were from the North, but she was from California and raised in a very sheltered religious environment. So this was really something to her to travel across the country and be with all of these students and be living with the families that they were trying to help. So it was fascinating getting that. I don't think I could have really written this without being able to talk to her and understand what her experience was like.
Well, I'm so appreciative that you had that opportunity so that we could have our reading experience. And I also wanted to give a shout out to that teacher who helped you with your research. Do you remember her name?
Mrs. Westfall.
Isn't that amazing how that teacher just made such an impression on you?
Yeah,
And
she was
your
about
career.
100 then, so I'm sure she's not still with us, but I think about her a lot.
But her family. I mean, I think it's wonderful that you took that with you your entire career. It's amazing. So thank you, teachers, not just librarians. Now you took on a dual timeline for this book. How do you decide when you're going to use it? What are your benefits, your struggles when doing it? And how do you keep it all straight?
It's really funny, or it's funny to me anyhow. When I was trying to think of what I wanted to write about next, scope was one idea, but I also had this idea of a therapist, which is what I used to be, and somebody coming into her office and saying that she wanted to kill someone. So I thought that would make an interesting story. And then I thought, well, what if I put those two stories together? So obviously, Kayla is not a therapist. My significant other said, no more therapists, because I go to that well quite frequently. So, so I made Kayla an architect, and I made the crazy lady come in. And part of what the crazy lady says is that she's thinking of killing someone. So then I had these two stories that seemed completely unrelated, and how were they going to fit together? So I really enjoy those kinds of puzzles for myself, to try to figure that out. What am I going to do? How am I going to fit these together? And then what I always do, I do outline. So I knew where each one was going to a degree. I always say that my characters never saw the outline. So they, they shove me around as I'm writing the story. But once I have a good idea of what I want each story to tell, and also I know when they're going to come together, when the two stories are going to merge, then I write each one separately. I wrote all of Kayla's stuff, and then I wrote all of Ellie's. And actually, I think I got that backwards. I wrote Ellie's first and then Kayla's. And of course, once they merged, then I'm writing from both perspectives. And it's unnerving because I'm never sure how it's going to fit together. But usually it's like a miracle. They do fit. I just have to tweak here and there. And then I've got a story. That makes it sound so easy.
Voila. So was one character easier or harder than the other? Was Kayla or Ellie, did they come more naturally, or was
I think it's obvious in the book that I was more wedded to Ellie's story. I mean, I was very interested in Kayla. I liked her. I liked what she added to the book, and I liked her more contemporary point of view. But Ellie's story was like deep in my heart. And I think that most readers would pick up on that.
I felt the same way. I think because your emotions are flowing through Ellie, they flow right through us as readers. So she's endearing, and she's a spitfire when she's not really asked or wanted to be in North Carolina. Did Miss Gittin, did she mention if there were any Southern scope workers like Ellie, or was that sort of
There really were not. And that's one of the things that Maria told me, because when I told her my idea of having this Southern young woman be part of scope, she said she would not be accepted. She would not be accepted by the Northern students. She would not be accepted by the people she was trying to help. So that meant two things. One is I had to really remember that and make it very difficult for her to fit in. But even more important, I had to, I forgot what was more important. She just really had to work hard. Oh, I know what it was. She really had to have a motivation. So I thought of several motivations for her. And one was the experience that she had with her neighbor, Maddie, and feeling guilt about that situation and wanting to make up for it in some way. But then she also was involved in the protests at her university. And that really, she started out not caring about that, but then the more she covered them, the more she got involved, and she made an acquaintance, a Black acquaintance at her university, and that inspired her more. But what really was the bottom line for her, I think, was her Aunt Carol, who was a Northerner and who really turned her into a little young radical. And so I think that those three things combined really gave her the motivation to be a part of this group. even though she was a Southerner.
Well, and you always want a lot of tension, really, for there to be some movement in the novel. And this does it because at every moment a truck passes by, we're holding our breath as well, because we're not quite sure, when that danger is going to be there. And she didn't either. When I looked at your website, which everybody, I think it's a great website, you said when talking about your novels, you state, quote, that they do all have in common is the focus on relationships between men and women, parents and children, sisters and brothers, friends and enemies. I can't think of anything more fascinating than the way people struggle with life's trials and tribulations, both together and alone. And how do you think this applies to The Last House? Because I know what I got from it with those relationships, but what did you want to get through?
Well, one of the things that was really of interest to me was how Ellie's family and friends would react to her becoming part of Scope. And so I had to think through each one of those characters and figure out friend or foe, or somewhere in the middle. And I don't think anybody would be very kind to her about it, and they're not. So I think that was a big part of figuring out what those relationships would be like, and also what it would do to her friendship and her relationship with her boyfriend, whose name I'm blanking on.
Read.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's really hard when you're moving on to another book and then you've got to go back and remember everybody. So, and one of my favorite characters to write about was Buddy, her brother, because I think he's more complex than you realize at first. He just seems like a good old boy, but there's a lot going on there inside of him. And I think probably you're always a little off kilter with him, trying to figure out, is he friend or foe? So it was a fun cast of characters to work with.
Well, that was the one character. As soon as I read that quote, it went straight to Buddy, because you're not sure where he fits on that spectrum. And there's so much love between the two. It's hard to imagine him as being an awful person. But then when you grow up in an area where every single one of your best friends is in the KKK, it's hard to burst out of that mold.
Yeah.
While your sister's doing Scope. So I loved that he was so complex. And I loved that he was there during Kayla's stories as well, because that helped us figure out where we wanted him to be. Now I want to talk a little bit about your narrator. So Susan Bennett, you have used her in the past, right?
Awesome.
She's fantastic. I mean, she's really a really great narrator. How do you go about choosing? Or do you just say, oh, I want Susan?
Well, in the old days, I had no choice.
Okay.
But lately, my publisher will ask who I want. And I always ask for Susan Bennett if she's available. And she always has been. And I just think she's phenomenal because she has mastered the voices for the different characters. She never loses them. I did an interview with her one time, and she read a section of the book where everybody is in the scene, and she just whipped through it, changing those point of view voices at ease and really capturing each character. I cannot even imagine the talent that it takes to do that.
So do you go back and listen to your audiobooks in totality?
I do.
Some authors can't, but so I'm always curious what the reason.
Well, it's fun at that point because usually I'm away from the story for months and months and months, and then it comes back fresh again when I listen to it. So before I go on the road or try to do interviews, it puts it back in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what's always funny to me is how her reading might be different in just an inflection. Like if I we're reading the end of a certain chapter, and in my mind, my voice goes down at the end of the final sentence and hers goes up, and I'm like, wait a minute. And then I think, that might be better. And the other thing is, this was not Susan. This was another narrator who was also an excellent narrator. But it was one of my other books. Actually, it's the book we're giving away tonight, which is Pretending to Dance. There's a character in there named Amalia. And Karen, the narrator, when she got to it, she said, Amalia. And when my partner and I were in the car listening to this, and when she got to Amalia, we both went, Amalia, because it was just so different than I had imagined. But I got used to it. And see, now I can't even remember which was which. And I wrote about it on Facebook, just, joking about it. And she read it and she was so upset that she hadn't checked with me. But she had just read narrated another book that had an Amalia in it. So of course she thought that's the way to pronounce it. And what does it matter? It doesn't matter at all.
Well, it's however it ends, right? So now you're saying Amalia because that's
how exactly. Now I can't remember.
How much communication does happen between narrator and author during this process? And do you hear it before it goes into publication?
No.
Okay.
No. And actually, I think there was very little with Susan. Usually it'll be pronunciation issues, like how do you pronounce this or that? How strong of a Southern accent should this character have, that kind of thing. But I don't think Susan and I talked at all before she narrated this book, except for me to email her to say how excited I was that she was doing it.
The only thing that threw me for a loop as a Southerner was I've always pronounced it kudzu. And I even asked my North Carolina friends, and they're like, I think it's kudzu. And so we've been having this debate about kudzu versus kudzu, because when you look it up on Google, it says kudzu.
Does it really?
Yeah.
I've never said kudzu.
Me either, but that's how she pronounces it. It cracked me up. I was like, I'm gonna have to ask. Someone's asking about the title of this book, and I think I know the story because I'm on the Diane Chamberlain Readers Group page. Can you talk a little bit about the title of this novel?
Yeah, well, as usual, I turned it in. I think my idea was the dark end of the street. But as my agent and my editor and I were moving along in the process, they never liked my titles. And especially because as we delved into this book and became more and more concerned about racial elements of the book, the word dark was starting to sound not good. So we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I think it was somebody, I went to my Facebook readers, which I always turn to my Facebook readers because they have such good brains. And we started playing with different ideas. And I think somebody there came up with The Last House on the Street. And it just really works.
Yeah, that's exactly what I remember. You came to the readers and said, hey, I need some help with this title. Y'all brainstorm. And I mean, it just came. It was like a flood. And you're like, I picked one of them, I'll let you know. And sure enough, everybody was so excited because it almost feels like a group project at that point.
And they also helped me with Big Lies in a Small Town. Somebody finally said, out of 300 or 400 suggestions, Small Town, Big Lies. And I thought, oh, and we reversed it and it was perfect.
It is.
Thank you, all you Facebook folks.
And if you aren't on that Facebook group yet and you love Diane Chamberlain, get onto it. It's fantastic. You get all the scoop there. So what the cover of the book, do you have any say in that? Do you care? Do you let the artist do their thing and you just sort of approve it? What's the process for you?
Yeah. Well, sometimes we don't like it. And so my agent and I will talk to them, or my agent is always my go-between. So my agent will say, you know, we're not happy with this cover. We don't think it represents the story very well, or we don't like the colors or whatever. With this book, we really liked it right from the start. This is the cover. The only thing we asked them to change in this one, originally, the man and woman are holding hands. And we didn't want it to look like a romance novel. So we asked them to have them let go of each other's hands, and they did. So we were otherwise happy with it because it has kind of that moody, mysterious, what's happening look to it.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't say romance at all, and I would not classify this as a romance. Do you set this novel in historical fiction in a book, on a bookshelf in a bookstore?
I would, or general fiction. This has been a problem since the very beginning of my career. My first novel won the Romance Readers of America Best Single Title Novel of 1989. And that sort of, I wasn't a romance reader. I didn't set out to write a romance, but it turned out to be a very romantic book. And so I think the reason it won that award was because I didn't know that there were rules you were supposed to follow back then with writing romance. So I broke them all. And so I think it stood out because I didn't know what I was doing. So after that, since that was so clearly a romance, then bookstores didn't know what to do with me. When a Diane Chamberlain novel came to them, they were like, where do we put this thing? So for a long time, they would stick me in romance, whether my book was romantic or not, and then more into general fiction. And it's only been the last 6 or so books that I've written that have more of a historical bent. So now sometimes I'm in history. But honestly, I'm most comfortable in general fiction because there's almost always a current day part to my stories. And I just don't think that they can be locked in to any particular genre.
Well, we love that you're breaking rules and keep on doing it. So now in the book that you were holding, there's an author's note at the end, which I've referenced to. On the audiobook, it's not included. So I asked Susan about this, and she said it's normally a book-to-book decision. Do you know why it was not included in the audiobook? Because I listened to it and it ended, and then I started going back through to get ready, and I'm like, oh, here's this fabulous author's note.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I knew that, that it's not there. But I can guess why. It's probably because the audiobook was done before the author's note was done.
Okay.
Because I always do the author's note later. So it could just be, and it's separate, I turn it in separate from the book.
Okay.
So most likely what Susan received, it didn't have it there.
Gotcha. It's I think it's pretty vital for this one. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but I really enjoyed the backstory about your research, because this, I mean, my guess is, did it take a lot of research for this book for it to come to be? And how long did that take?
Well, since I had a year to write it, that's how long it took. I had 2 years, it would have taken 2 years.
But your contract?
Yeah.
Time period? Okay.
Yeah, it was a year-long contract. The problem with the author's note, and I'm adjusting it for the paperback release, I've gotten a lot of flack from people who are very upset that I mentioned Republicans. And it's hard for me because I was telling the truth, which is that there were a lot of Republicans who want to tighten, who want voting restrictions, more voting restrictions. And I go into a long explanation in the author's note of how that came to pass, because the Voting Rights Act got rid of the ability for Southern states to have restrictions. And now in 2013, the Supreme Court did away with that ruling. So now the restrictions are flying quickly. So a lot of people got angry with me because they felt that I was saying that we shouldn't have voter IDs. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I am absolutely fine with having voter IDs as long as the mom of 4 kids who's working 2 jobs and doesn't drive can easily get a voter ID. So if we can do that, I mean, it would be great if we could do that and everybody who's qualified could have a voter ID. I would be thrilled. So that was not what I was concerned about. I'm much more concerned about the ways we're nibbling away at the ability for people to vote. Taking away Sunday voting, which is when Black folks historically vote, that sort of thing. That's what bothers me. So I tightened it up a little bit for the paperback. I don't mention Republicans. I do mention the fact that that I think a voter ID is fine as long as it's a equal playing, a level playing field for everybody to get them.
Well, you'd hope that everybody would be pro accessibility for voting. I mean, that's, if there's not, then what do we really have, right? That right is our most essential. So I appreciated it. I enjoyed this version, and I'll be looking to see what your next version is. Okay, you mentioned 1 year. So how did COVID affect this book, this timeline, this publication, publicity? Give us the rundown.
Well, it was out before COVID. And so I started doing my usual tour of going various places to speak about it. Did you have something, Laura Beth?
Well, I was thinking that this one had just come out in this January, right?
No.
Okay.
Last January.
Last January. See, my timeline's all off. Okay. So
I understand that.
Okay. So it's out, and then what happens?
And then, so the rest of my, I guess starting in March, the rest of my tour got canceled. And then Zoom came into being, and I did a lot of Zooming. So it did, it affected it, but I did get to go a few places prior to it happening, prior to the lockdown.
Okay. Besides the Zoom, everything else was pretty much the same. Like, because I'd heard that there was difficulty just getting books printed and out there and things like that. Did any of that affect you at all?
No, fortunately, that was all taken care of before the pandemic hit.
Okay.
So I do know, I have friends who were very badly affected, the production of their books and all of that.
Okay. So I think the readers, so we didn't get our ARCs until December of 2021. So I don't think it came out till January 2022 for this book. I think Big Lies in a Small Town, that one came out right before COVID, because that's where I met you, right? Am I crazy? Yeah, January 22. Thank you, Christine and Jill. January 2022. We are
copyright 2021.
Really? How is that possible?
I know, time flies.
Oh my gosh. I'm telling you. Well, I'm losing it. My son's in my senior in high school is in Germany right now, studying abroad. So my brain is just about everywhere right now. So anyways, let's get back on track and focus on this. Okay, you mentioned a sensitivity reader, and I've only heard this one other time with Adele Myers for The Tobacco Wife, and she mentions the same thing. She's a white reader and talking about African-American roles in the Deep South. So tell us what that is, that process, how it worked for you, how it was beneficial, because I don't think a lot of people know about this.
Yeah. As we got deep into the editing process, my editor said that she thought that I should use the term Black throughout the book, even though the term Black really didn't come into being until later. This is set in 65, and it wasn't till 68, I think, 67, 68, that the term Black started being used. So, so I did some research and learned pretty much that a lot of Black folks would have been insulted by the term Black. But in order to make comfortable current day audiences, my editor really felt like I should use that term. So I asked, and she was completely on board with having a sensitivity reader. And what that means is that my publisher hired a Black editor to read the book and give her opinion with how that should be handled. The weird thing is, and I was really heartened by the fact that the sensitivity reader seemed to be really happy with, or at least happy is the wrong word, because she really wasn't expressing happiness or not happiness. She was expressing accuracy. She really seemed to feel that I had hit the topic accurately. However, she agreed with me that the term Black would not have been used back then, but she still felt that I should use it. So I went back and forth. I went through the whole darn manuscript and changed, colored and Negro to Black, 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 the whole way through. And then when I sat down to read the manuscript, I was like, this is not working. This just isn't right. So I discussed it with my editor and my agent, and they were in agreement with me that if I felt that strongly about it, that I should do what I want to do. So I went back and I obviously changed it. The way I dealt with it was having Wynne be kind of ahead of his time. Wynne is sort of moving away from the pacifism of Martin Luther King toward a more radical sensitivity toward racial issues. And so he is using the term Black, which inspires Ellie then to occasionally use the term Black. So that's how I dealt with it. I've Zoom met with 2 all Black women's book clubs, and I discussed this with them, and they were completely on board with me, agreeing with me that I should have used it the way I used it, used the language the way I did. So I'm really glad that I did that. It feels much truer to the time to me than it would have otherwise. But I think it's just, it's such a sensitive area right now that I do think we have to take people's sensitivities into account and figure out the best way to deal with this issue.
Well, and because it is a dual timeline, I do like that you take those historical references seriously. It's not too loosey-goosey, and that it makes it feel very real if you're sticking to what was really happening during 1965, right? So I appreciated that research. I appreciated your inferences and just the mannerisms of people and their culture, and it was fantastic. So I'm glad there are the sensitivity readers, though. I mean, there's sort of a fine line as to what the author wants to portray and what, I know certain authors don't like them for other reasons, not racially, but I guess they're sensitivity readers for all kinds of things.
Well, one of the things that the sensitivity reader suggested that I vetoed was a trigger warning. And she wanted a trigger warning at the start of the book about violence. And my editor and I felt that that would be appropriate for a young adult novel, but we didn't feel like it was appropriate for an adult novel. So I don't know how, I'd be curious to know how readers feel about that. But to me, it was like, if I picked up a book and it said trigger warning violence, the whole time I'm reading, I'd be like, oh, when is the violence going to happen?
Right.
So I'm glad that we did not do that.
Yeah, I really don't want to know too much when going in as a reader, but I think that there are readers that if they have very specific triggers for them, then there are websites or Facebook groups that have lists of books to maybe avoid. And that's nice for those of us who don't want the warnings, but nice for them that they have this group where people will say, hey, I've heard this, or I read this. This may not be for you if, kind of thing.
That's a really good way to do it.
So, all right. If you have a question, I love that people were joining in your photo there, Lindsay. Let's go ahead and get questions ready. And so raise your hand. And while we're doing that, start getting your thoughts together. I'm going to ask quick rapid fire questions of you, Diane. Are you ready? Okay. Beach, lake, or mountains?
Beach.
All right. Modern or traditional architecture?
Modern.
Morning, day, or night reader?
Night.
Same, but for writing?
Morning.
All right. Who's your author best friend?
Mary Kay Andrews.
All right. Red or white wine?
Zero.
I'm with you. It was in the book, so I thought maybe. All right. What's one of your favorite books?
Charlotte's
That
Web.
you wrote. Oh, sorry. That you wrote.
I wrote.
Yeah, your book.
Secret Lives, which is my third book.
And what was the hardest book you wrote?
I'm not going to be able to answer this one quickly. I'll say The Last House on the Street.
Okay. The book you think of the most of yours?
The very first one, Private Relations. Don't read it, but it's the one I think of the most.
And your favorite freedom song?
My favorite, I'll Fly Away.
Me too. I love it. I love it. All right, let's go ahead and get to readers' questions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you. Let me see if I can find this. I don't know how to, it's not working today. All right, so you have to start your video. I guess I put you on spotlight since you don't have your camera on, but that's okay. So who's up? Tina Hammer, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. Hello.
Hi, Tina.
Hey, I'm wondering if you write a lot of books, and I'm wondering if you ever have trouble getting kind of stuck on themes that you've already written about, or storylines when you're writing a book, as opposed to having a fresh new idea in your ready to come out your fingertips.
You point out that there's a lot of books. So a lot of times I'll go, oh, here's an idea. And then I'll go, oh, I already did that. Oh, here's an idea. What? Already did that. So yeah, it is kind of challenging to, make sure I'm not going back to the same well too often.
Does it take you very long to get over that hump usually?
Yeah. It's, unless I have an idea right off the bat, then it takes me quite a while. It'll take me months to figure out what I want to write about. I'll be all over the map. But for example, with this book, I knew that I wanted to write about scope, so that was easy. The book before that, Big Lies in a Small Town, I had no idea what I wanted to write about. So I was, moving from idea to idea to idea, which is a terrifying thing when the clock is ticking on your contract.
Oh, I bet. That was an awesome book too.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Nikki, you have a question about Aunt Carol. Do you want to go ahead and ask that?
Sure, and I'm not going to turn my video on.
That's fine.
Love the book, fantastic.
Thank you.
Readers in favor of Aunt Carol getting her own book, her own storyline.
Ah, that's really interesting.
Well, her being an Army nurse, surely that led to her progressive mindset.
Yeah.
And I just loved her so much. I would love to hear her backstory.
Oh, very interesting. I'll think about it, but I don't think so. I think, sometimes I'm just done with a character. But I'm really, really glad that you felt that way about her, because I did too. She has a bit part. We don't really ever truly see her. But without her, I don't think Ellie would have been Ellie.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to go to Chris. You have a question for us?
I think.
Oh, hold on. I'm going to ask you, you're muted again.
Okay.
There you are. Go ahead.
Fix it.
Yep.
Oh, okay. First of all, I wanted to say I absolutely loved your book. A friend of mine sent that to me. So this was the first book I read by you, and I've already read Big Lies and working my way through them. I wanted to say I was really fascinated with, you said social work, because my youngest is getting a social work degree in December. So he's really excited about that. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, when did you know that you really want to be a writer? Because obviously you found your niche.
I really knew as like a first grader.
Oh, wow.
Because that's when our teacher read Charlotte's Web to us. And I thought, oh my God, a person did this. How cool is that? I don't think I said how cool is that as a first grader, but I was just astonished that a person could make me cry and laugh and all of that. However, when it came time to go to college, it never occurred to me that you could make a living as a writer. So that's why I went into social work, which actually turned out to be a fantastic degree. Good luck to your son. There's so many things that you can do with a social work degree, and there's so many different experiences that you can have, and they all feed that creative well. So when I finally did start writing, I just had such an understanding of people that came from that career that it really was social work. And I think any people-oriented nursing, doctoring, teaching, any people-oriented kind of career just gives you so much understanding of people that go into fiction writing.
Right. Well, I'm truly enjoying starting to work through your library, so I appreciate it.
Enjoy.
Thank you. All right, Kristen, I'm going to put your spotlight up. Go ahead, Kristen, you have a question. This works in perfectly, by the way.
I just was wondering if the social worker character in Necessary Lies was anything based on things that you had experienced.
The social worker in Necessary Lies is in 1960.
Oh, yeah.
And back then, social workers didn't have a degree, or if they had a degree, they went into administration. So Jane, she had no training. She was just thrown to the wolves. Her supervisor, I broke her supervisor's leg right off the bat, so she had no supervision. She was just making a mess of things. So she was not very much like me, either personality-wise or career-wise. She had much more courage than I had, but she also did some stupid things that I would never have done. So, but that's what made an interesting story, I think.
I loved that
one.
one.
Done everything by the book. It wouldn't have been nearly as interesting.
True. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, Nanette has a question. I'm not sure that she wants to go live, but I'm going to ask it for her. Who do you initially discuss your story ideas with?
My partner, John, and he tells me everything that's wrong with them and that I should probably scrap the whole idea. And he is not very, oh, Diane, that is wonderful. Oh, he's never said that ever. No, there's none of that. It's just everything that's not going to work. And the thing is, it ends up helping. And finally, if I can get to the point in the writing that he says, this is really good and it works, he never says this is really good, but if he says, this is okay, hey, that's the best we can do here. But he's very supportive, but he's really, really honest. And he doesn't, pat me on the head and says, oh, this is nice, little girl. It's everything that's wrong with it, I will know.
He's not going to sugarcoat or rose-colored glasses or anything. But hey, it sounds like that you found the partner you needed, though, because it worked.
I think I did.
All right. On a more somber note, wanted to say that I'm just been thinking about you. I know that you lost your brother a couple of weeks ago, and we've all been, just sending condolences. It's very hard to lose a family member. Are you okay? Now, this is spoiler area, guys. So if you haven't, are you okay talking about what happened to Win in the story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. My brother was 2 days away from being 83. We'd been prepared for this. It was sudden in that we didn't think it was going to be now, but we also took comfort in the fact that he had made preparations. He was ready. He knew what he wanted. He had prepared all of us. So I really learned a lot from how he made preparations for this to happen. And it woke me up in terms of what we all need to do to prepare ourselves and our families.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most thoughtful things you can do for your loved ones you leave behind is to do as much as you can to prepare, because it's so appreciated.
Yes.
Having that guidance, knowing you're doing what they want you to do.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
No,
I have no problem talking about Win.
Okay. I know when I lost my dad, I'd cry at the drop of a hat. So I just wanted to clear that before. This dragging was one, that's what you were referring to with the trigger warning for violence.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide on this violent act? And then I want to bring it more to modern day, but let's talk about why you chose what you did.
It wasn't really a conscious decision. It was when I am writing a scene, I just let it play out in my mind, and that is how it played out. So I went with it because I thought, that's really horrific, and I could imagine it happening. At the same time, we never see it. We never really see it. We know it's happening, but we don't have to see it. I don't think I could have written it if we were actually seeing it. So I think using our imaginations was enough.
Yeah, I think that's where Sally Hepworth brought in that rage quote, because it makes you so angry and you don't even need to see it in detail to have that rage.
Mm-hmm.
But then jumping forward to modern day, I remember when I was in college, you think, oh, this is a thing of the past, but this has happened in modern day to African-American men as well. James Byrd, that happened within like 2.5 hours of my university. I was at Rice when that happened. Mm-hmm. And so I just think, God, you think this is 1965, and then it happens again 10 years later in Texas, again to another African-American man. It's just, it blew my mind, and to think this really isn't history. This really is,
right.
What's happened now?
Man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah. It blows my mind. How do you see this book fitting in? You said it was very pertinent with the voters' rights, but how do you see this fitting into today's topics of racial injustice as well?
Well, I think that I think it's opened some eyes from the email that I get, separate from the angry email that I get. A lot of people have said that it opened their eyes, and that they, older readers say they remember, that it just brought back so many memories for them. of things that were happening like this back then. But so many younger readers are shocked to realize that this kind of thing, this kind of intolerance was going on. So, I like a book that can educate as well as entertain. And so when I hear from a reader that they learned something as well as really enjoyed reading the book, that's heartwarming to me.
I agree. And not only did it do both of those things, but it also starts conversations, something that Ellie never really had with any family member or friend about race. So I appreciated those topics coming up again, so I could discuss them with my friends and family because everybody's reading this book. Now moving on to a little bit really quick, moving on to some brighter things. What are you working on right now? Can you tell us anything?
I took a year off. That's why I know this didn't come out until, before this year. I really took a year off. I've turned in one book a year it's actually 28 books that I've written. And I just felt like, I do not want to completely burn out. I would just want some time for me. And then, so I decided I was going to take the time and talk to my agent, my editor about it. And then the pandemic hit, so I didn't get to go any place or do anything, but I didn't have any pressure. So I really needed that. So I'm just now starting the next book. And all I can tell you, I don't even want to tell you. Well, I'll tell you. It involves a plane crash and a white deer.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you.
Is it in North Carolina? Do we know that?
It takes place in the Raleigh area.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. You heard it first here, people. All right. One other question, and I love asking this because it gives us a little bit of insight into your reading life. What books would you recommend that you're reading now or that you've loved in the past that you would like for us to check out?
I just started Geraldine Brooks' Horse. I don't know if any of you have read that. I think she's amazing. I've read several of her books and they're all deeply researched and they're all about totally different topics. So how she does that, I don't know. But this one, I'm not even sure what it's about yet. It's about a horse, that much I know. But she's grabbed me very quickly. And I just finished listening to a book about Georgia O'Keeffe because I listen to calm sleep stories in my ears before I go to sleep. And there was one about Georgia O'Keeffe. And of course, I know a little bit about her, but it really made me want to learn more. So I listened to a biography about her that was totally fascinating. And I just finished, what is it again, Laura Beth? The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post, which is amazing. That's a true story, of course.
Yeah, it's a great one. And if I'm not mistaken, there's some works of Georgia O'Keeffe at the Reynolds Center in Winston-Salem.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they have some displays of her work there. So if you're ever
an incredible character.
Oh yeah, amazing.
It's fascinating.
Well, thank you so much, Diane, for being here. Thank you, readers, for joining us. Please make sure and check out her Facebook page. She has a great readers group and Instagram. And if you don't mind, please follow me, the LBs, the Lover of Books, on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm going to try to post this video on YouTube, so check out my channel. And a couple of Sundays on September 11th, I'm going to be hosting Jahia Ken for her debut novel, Beast of a Little Land, while New York Times bestselling author Lisa C. says this is a spectacular debut filled with great characters and heart. Entertainment Weekly says, I read this 400-page epic story about war and love across decades of South Korea's history in a single setting. It's a twist on historical fiction that roars with life. You won't want to miss it. Thanks again, Mike, for helping me run behind the scenes. If you know of any author that you'd love to hear chat, please let me know. And I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Thanks again, Diane.
Thank you so much, Laura Beth. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.